Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I apologize for my voice is a bit low. I got a cold, but I should still be able to speak properly. So, first of all, something more about me. I'm originally from Italy, but I've been in Singapore for many years now, almost 8 years, and it's when I relocated over here that I started working seriously, say professionally, in the field of game design, game development. It was across different institutions, starting from NTU, where I was involved in R&D for serious games, and also we will see some of the projects I worked on at the time as case studies in this talk. Then I went to NYP, to DigiPen, and now to James Cook University. In the meantime, I also wrote a couple of books, and also tried to collaborate with the industry and be involved in some social games on Facebook with a local startup. So the main, aim, goal of this talk is to kind of understand how important is fun also for serious games, and then to try to find a way to kind of analyze a game to understand if this game has the right potential of really being fun for all its players. So we will do this by checking into two main models for analyzing and understanding games, the MDA and also the 611 framework. And we have a few case studies to really see how this analysis can be done in practice and how these games actually can or cannot be fun. So, okay, we all know what serious games are, because there can be many slightly different definitions, but in general, serious games are those games that are designed for some real kind of serious purpose of solving a problem or education and so on. So when we talk about serious games, we always have the idea that, the serious topics come first, and then making also something which is engaging and fun may not necessarily be one of the main aspects or one of our main concerns. On the other hand, if we check also the definition of one of the biggest buzzwords of the last few years, so gamification, we see that this has been so successful because it tries to solve problems by adding some game design elements into the real activity, so to make actually more engaging and fun. So fun is indeed one of the main components that we should always have in mind when we design an experience, and most importantly, even when we design a game, even if this game is not made just for mere entertainment. But fun should always be one of the concerns, the main concerns of the game developers. But then how can we really understand if a game is fun and if really we did our job properly? Well, we would need, as Descartes said, a method so that we can try to reason accurately. But this is very tricky in game design because every game designer kind of explain their approaches and how they go through the process of designing a game in a very kind of subjective ways. So it's really not very clear what makes a good game design and how we can really try to practice also our game design skills and check our game design process. So we should need a kind of a pragmatic approach that tries to be objective. So there will always be a degree of subjectivity, but a little more objective than just try to make things based on our inspiration. So the MDA, which maybe some of you are familiar with, breaks down a game into three main layers. So there are at the bottom the mechanics, which are basically the game rules. So these are how we actually play the game. Then there are the dynamics, which is what happens in the game when we apply the rules. So is what to do in the game and try to explain the player's behavior in the game. And then last, there are, last there are the aesthetics. Sorry. Okay, so last there are the aesthetics, which are supposed to be the okay, these slides doesn't show up properly. Yeah. Anyway, it was supposed to be the emotional experience of the players, and this is clearly the most difficult part that to understand in our analysis, because it really concerns about all the subjective area of the players. So how do players feel when they play the game? what the players really want to experience, and ultimately what triggers fun in the game. So the guys who developed the MDA model then try to analyze these aspects by defining eight kinds of different fun that seems to be common, which are very common in many different games or different genres. So there is a fun on sensations, on the pleasure that we get from the game, on fantasy, for example, in role-playing games, then on narrative related to storytelling, and so on. So to give an example of a game, if we play a game which is based mostly on commerce, then we could have, like in this case the picture is for Anno 1404 from Ubisoft, then we could have that the mechanics are the core, the most basic ones, are kind of buying items, selling items, and then traveling from city to port, so that we can buy low and sell high, and then build our empire little by little. So the dynamics, so the kind of the gameplay of the game that emerges from applying these rules, then is a kind of trading game where we start also strategizing which road to take, where we can buy things at the cheapest cost, and then turn them, sell them for a profit, and so on. And then the aesthetics that this game tends to, the types of fun that these games tends to elicit in the players, then is kind of fantasy. It's a role-playing experience. We are playing as a trader in an old age, and we are kind of getting rich and enjoy our role. And then also submission of a pastime that people just enjoys getting into the world to spend sometimes in a kind of nice activity. Anyway, in my also experience as a teacher, I realized that the aesthetics tend to be, and the 8 kinds of fun, tends to be very tricky for students to really appreciate, understand, and then relate to the actual gameplay. So that's when I started thinking also of an alternative way to represent the emotional experience of players. And then I designed the so-called 611 framework, which sees fun as an outcome from engaging players through a set of 6 basic emotions and instincts as they are defined in psychology. So, and also can keep track of how these can relate to each other and interact with each other. And what turns out is that it becomes very straightforward then to relate these emotional instincts to the actions, to the gameplay and the mechanics of the game. So it becomes a very straightforward analysis process. So what are these 6 basic emotions and 11 instincts that seems to be so important in games from all different genres of games? Well, for the 6 emotions, we have first fear. So fear, think of many games, clearly all in the survival, horror, genre, and so on, is one of the most common emotions that games tend to evoke in players. Then anger, which is always a very strong motivational force for players. And also pride. We are always very happy when we can beat a new record, get an achievement, get all the stars, and so on. Then, more interestingly, we have joy and excitement, which we can easily relate to and are clearly a very important component of most games. But very interestingly, sadness can also play a very meaningful role, even if we don't associate naturally the emotion of sadness to a fun game. But still, sadness can play a very important role to create a meaningful experience. And we will see also in serious games can have a very meaningful role. And then what are the 11 instincts instead? Well, we have survival, which clearly tends to match very well with fear. Then revenge, this is something can be one of the kind of most engrossing and satisfying moment in a game. So think also of Pac-Man, where the player spends most of the time of the game to escape the ghosts. Then when you finally get to the power pellet, you have a few seconds where you can actually chase them back and basically get your revenge against the ghost. So that's something that really made the game much more interesting and appealing. Then also curiosity. We have a natural tendency to really try to explore new areas, find out how things work, and so on. And this is something that is very important to make a game engaging and ultimately fun also. Then we have self-identification, So we naturally tend to, we want to kind of identify ourselves with the hero of the story, to save the world, or be really the main character that performs some very dangerous and risky duty and task and so on. Other instincts which are always relevant are aggressiveness. We are kind of aggressive being animals, so that's something that many games clearly emphasize. All the violent games and so on clearly rely on this specific instinct. And also competition. We love to compete and see who's best and how much we can push ourselves and so on. So competition is also very important. Others, we have protection and care. This can act both as a long-term motivation for a game. Think when all the games where we need to save the princess or our girlfriend and so on, so they try to make us really care for someone, or really in a more kind of focused way. Think of games like Nintendogs, where you really need to constantly take care of a puppy and so on, or even of games like maybe even stretching a little bit, let's say also even Farmville, where we really want to take care of also our own plants and make them grow well and then upgrade them and so on. There can also be some aspects even in those type of games. Other things that are always effective and therefore games is greed. Clearly we enjoy when we can start getting more and more money, getting rich in the game and so on. And also collecting. So for some reasons, we really have a kind of natural tendency to take things together, form a pattern, and form a set of objects, of related objects. And this psychologically also relates to our hunting instinct. So when we have almost a set and we still miss one specific item, maybe an old video game or a stamp or something to complete our collection, it really becomes really kind of a hunt that we have to do to really find the last piece and complete the set. So this is very important and really pervasive in many different games. And then last, we have communication. So we are social animals, so we love to share our ideas, our experiences, and just chat with each other. And also color appreciation. So not really important if we are designing a kind of photorealistic virtual world or just a kind of a fantasy game, but if you have something which is colorful, this is really going to attract players much more easily and to engage them more easily. So a nice picture in a casual game with lots of color will attract players much more than just a gray image, so on. So how does all this then come together? The idea is that in the 611 framework, we succeed in if we succeed in triggering some emotions in the players, then this will trigger some instincts, and then instincts will push the player to act in the game. So the act on the game means that they will start really playing the game and experiencing the gameplay, which means that they are getting into the dynamics area of the game, and then we can relate the dynamics to the mechanics. So if, let's say, we suddenly scare the player by showing a monster that appears right next to him in the game, this can trigger then the fear instinct, which then leads to the survival, the fear emotion that leads to the survival instinct. So the player will have a kind of moment where he had to subconsciously to decide whether fight or flight. So whether you have to escape and avoid the danger, or to say to fight back and stay put and try to hold your ground. So it's this will be the dynamic. Then the game allows the player to perform in the game, and then this will be made possible by the specific mechanics and rules in the game. So we can hide or run or can fight back and so on. Same thing if, say, we have a kind of anger, we succeed. Maybe we show like in Angry Birds with the pigs that steals the eggs from the birds, and this make the player naturally angry and wants really to take the kind of revenge and against the pigs and make the player more aggressive. So you start then, okay, you are aggressive to the right point that you want to really destroy all the pigs and start playing the game and shoot all your birds so that you destroy the the constructions and the fortresses that the pigs have managed to do. So we get the anger, aggressiveness, that then linked to the specific dynamic of the game, which then is implemented by the proper use of the mechanics that the game allow the players to use. So let's then go to some of the case studies that I wanted to show you today. So I'll take two from my personal experience, two projects that I worked on when I was in NTU, so Trust and the Virtual Orchestra, and then also another game, Haiti, The Cost of Life. And let's see if this game, how we can analyze these games and understand if they tried to excite these kind of instincts and emotions and be ultimately fun for their target audiences. So Trust was a rehabilitation game that was done in collaboration between NTU and BBC and a Smart Lab in the UK, and it was targeting kids in hospitals. So it was done in collaboration with KK Hospital here in Singapore a few years ago. So the idea was to put the kids who had some different issues, maybe motor issues, or need to do some rehabilitation, physiotherapy and so on, in a chair that could allow them to interact with the game in different ways, and then put them in a kind of colorful fantasy world to explore, so to make them more kind of engaged and have some kind of nice experience, while also trying to move their limbs and arms in a way that could facilitate the rehabilitation exercises. So how did we try to make this game fun? So first of all, we have the identification. So that's why we work in the game that the player has to drive in first person. In the game that we did, a kind of a magic car. So that was the kind of dynamic. And then this identification where the player is put in the magic car and also in the driver's seat in the chair then leads to a curiosity to start exploring the virtual world and so on. And then we put some further elements, so there are a lot of candies and bonus items that the player has to collect in as many as possible in a fixed time. And all these then could lead, together with the kind of colorful and nice graphics, then could lead to a kind of joyful and serene experience that we believe that it was fun. So the game actually tried to achieve fun by going through these different sequence of emotions and instincts of the player experience. Then the Virtual Orchestra, this was an educational game that targeting kids and young adults to teach something about music and also the kind of basic gestures that conductors would do in really to conduct an orchestra. And we did this, the main device by the game was a gyro mouse. This was done before the official release of the Wii, but the gyro mouse was actually like a Wiimote, so it had the same kind of controlling scheme and gameplay. So the players had to really wave the gyro mouse in a way that was really mimicking a certain number of conducting gestures, and then the orchestra were playing accordingly, and players would score a certain number of points according to their performance. But also, where is the fun in this game? We thought that just conducting the orchestra would have not been maybe enough to make the game more engaging. So we thought also of a small trick and to try to excite the protection instincts of the players. So we added a kind of health bar on top of the musicians. So it was not really an health bar, so if you get to 0, the musicians don't die, but what happens is that they start missing notes and playing out of tempo and very badly, and ultimately then the performance stops. So it gives some visual feedback also to the players of how the musicians are, say their health or the concentration level, and then ultimately how well they're playing. So we realized that this was really effective also for the kids to really want to keep the bar at the highest level so that the musicians were happy in a way. So the structure here, the analysis for this game, was that we start again from the identification. So the player is the conductor, is really in first person, can wave his or her hand with a gyro mouse and have a correct one-to-one feedback on what they were doing. And then we had the competition aspect. We have a score system, clearly. But besides this, we also wanted to make the game a little stronger, to add something on the protection sides, and that's the purpose of the focus, concentration level, and the health bar of the players. And then the the dynamics for the identification, just the performing the conducting gestures and then controlling music performance. There were different parameters that we could control in real time in the game. And then all these were obtained by the simple mechanics of just waving the gyro mouse and performing the specific gestures. Then the last game that I'd like to discuss was this Haiti, which was a very interesting game to kind of bring more awareness of the critical life conditions in different developing countries, in this case Haiti. And in this game, the player has to manage a family of 5 across multiple objectives, across different seasons, different years. Even though the player can choose to focus on one specific objective, like health or happiness or money or education, then all 4 have to be balanced properly in the game. So, well, where is the fun? Clearly, this game relied a lot on the protection instinct. So, it really was to make the players empathize with the family that they are controlling, and also make them realize how hard the living conditions are. So, there is the curiosity to see how the life evolves, and then how the different conditions of the in-game character of the family go through across the seasons and the years. And then there will be pride and joy if the player is successful, but the game is very tough, actually. So it's like a kind of real living conditions of in this kind of countries. So it's much more likely for the player to fail. And then really the game wants to really emphasize and the sadness of the situation and make the players feel sad. And so you see one of the likely outcome that you get where basically all the family members died or went very sick and had very miserable lives. So sadness in this case, and triggered by the protection instinct, becomes very important to really make the game meaningful, and in this case not really fun in a traditional way, but very effective in delivering its serious message. So that's how we can try to understand how the game works and how they can achieve their specific engaging objectives. So the conclusions that I wanted to go through in this short talk is that, well, a game without fun is a poor game, so there's really no questions about this. So even when we do serious games, we shouldn't really forget about the fun aspects. It should always be there, and our game should always be engaging. Then how we can evaluate or try to kind of predict if our game has all the right numbers to be engaging and fun, well, then we should try to analyze it and see if we can find the right structure and the right sequence from the emotional experience of the players to the game dynamics and the game mechanics. So an approach with an analysis using the MDA and the 611 frameworks can be effective in understanding if our game is potentially correct and likely to achieve its goals. And then these, which emotions and instincts are most relevant for our particular case is something that changes from case to case and according to both our goal and also our target audience. So kind of games for kids, for rehabilitation or education. Well, identification is very important. Competition is always very important. Kids really want to compete with each other and see who's best and if they can be better than friends and so on. And also curiosity is always a very important, a very strong component that we should find a way to really make the players curious about the environment and the task that they are going to do and practice with. While instead, if we take other issues which are even more serious and meaningful in kind of world issues like poverty and so on, well, then really here, besides curiosity, also the protection instinct, we should try really to make the players empathize with the characters and the situation that we are depicting. And then sadness as a consequence should really be a very important emotion that we want to trigger in the players to really make the experience poignant and meaningful. So, okay, thank you very much for your attention.